Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Just leave your seat. Right away, just leave it out.
Supervisor Gens. I understand. Thank you. Supervisor O'Day is excused. Moving on to citizen comments. Citizen comments. Any citizens wishing to speak, please step to the podium. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address for the record, please.
Depravity of injustice. And the basic one is there's a court commissioner here and everything. He sent out this one guy. He beat up his wife, beat up another person, and then he had a gun in it, and a court commissioner gave him $1,500 bail. The guy ended up robbing 3 banks. The same court commissioner did it with a lady, got beat up by her husband or her boyfriend, whatever it was, and it spent, like after a $1,000 bail, he got incarcerated again because he beat her up, went to the hospital. Now my friend, a veteran and everything, and the whole bit, he was late 10 minutes for his curfew and everything. He gave him a $2,000 bail. The guy is clean and everything from it. This man has been waiting to get tried since October for this, all right? Then I found out he hasn't had a medication. He's been on a medication for a minimum of 5 years to 10 years. The doctor came, he hasn't been on his medication in almost 2 weeks and everything. So this lady says, my husband doesn't get his medication. He has a heart medication and everything, and he hasn't got his medication. There's some problems here with this system where here is a doctor that's been there for years giving this man, my friends, drugs to keep him sane and everything, and this other doctor probably for years giving this other lady, her husband, the drugs, and they're not getting the drugs. My friend been there for 10 days so far. As of Sunday, he hasn't had it. I think somebody should look into this about how a doctor, a physician does that and everything, because if the man's been taking the drugs for 5 to 10 years and someone's got a heart problem and he's not taking their problems, that could lead to a legal suit for the county or the city, whatever it is. And I'd like to thank the policemen and and the sheriff and everything. I was a general contractor and I'm retired and everything. But, they have to worry about, not coming home. Well, I never have to worry about that. And the firemen now are dying because of the cancers they find. There's one guy named Shu from the city, died at 48 years old or 46. So I'd like to give them thanks, but there is a problem with this system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizens' comments? Citizens' comments? Any other citizens' comments? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Moving on, we have announcements of the chairman. I would like to welcome Maria Grenell of Judiciary and Law and Mackenzie Van Dixhorn of Judiciary and Law. Welcome, Youth and Governance. I don't have any other announcements at this time, so we're going to move on to a presentation from Ellers, the county's capital finance advisor, on bonding. I'd like to welcome Dawn Gunderson, please.
Thank you. Is this coming across okay? Everyone can hear me? Thank you. My name is Dawn Gunderson. As mentioned, I work with Ellers. We've been the county's municipal advisor for a number of years. I'm a senior advisor there, and I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about some of the basics of debt issuance. We many times call this presentation Debt 101. I will note that the presentation is on a PowerPoint now, but I will provide it to Barna, who will distribute it electronically to all the members, so you can have it for reference later. And hopefully, I don't want to get into too much of your meeting time, so if there's questions, and we have time at the end for questions, we'll take those. If any questions come up afterwards that I didn't answer or I didn't make clear, please feel free to contact either Mike Harrigan or myself. I've got the numbers on the end of this slide presentation, our email address and our numbers, so we're happy to help clarify anything that may come up in the future. So this evening, what I'm here to talk about a little bit is why governments issue debt, some basics of debt issuance, including the securities involved with it, some state and federal regulations that are associated with the issuance of debt, who the key players are there, how you're paying for those individuals, or how those individuals that are involved in debt issuance get paid, a little bit about the process and structuring of debt, and then I'll summarize with a little bit of, interspersed through this is some of the Kenosha County policies that have been enacted here, and I'll kind of follow up at the end and summarize a little bit of that. So why issue debt? There's obviously different ways of paying for capital projects, but issuance of debt is quite common for local governments and here in the state of Wisconsin as well. So the benefit of issuing and paying for capital projects with debt is you spread the cost of that project over a longer period of time. And many times it's the only way that governments can afford to do large capital projects, especially building infrastructure or building facilities that are going to be around for 20, 30 plus years. So the issuance of debt will mitigate the impact on the taxes on an annual basis and your fund balance, and allows for better management of the tax rate and the tax levy. And if there is any fees associated with paying for debt service, it also helps manage those as well. What it provides is an affordability for, on an annual basis for issuing debt. The one thing that we typically see, whether it's in counties or municipalities, is capital projects aren't always constant. You can have ebb and flows, or you can have needs that come up over periods of time, and it's not consistent every year. So if you were able to pay for those on a levy basis, you would see a roller coaster in your tax rate, and most taxpayers are not comfortable with that, where rates go up and go down and go up and go down and go up and down. So it allows a management and a measurement for that going forward. One of the other significant things here in Wisconsin is county governments are under what's called levy limits. And if you haven't been involved in the budgeting process here in the past, you're going to learn a lot about levy limits. And levy limits restrict how much governments can levy in taxes on an annual basis. So it really does prevent governments from accumulating cash to pay for projects. So levying more than what you need for operations, setting it aside and paying for projects into the future. But generally, debt issuance and debt service payments, they're exempt from that levy limit. So you're able to pay those on an annual basis outside that limitation. So the levy limits has restricted a lot of governments from undertaking capital projects, and has actually made the need to borrow much more prevalent. So the other thing that I think is very key in when you're borrowing for something to pay for a project, you're paying for things that have a long life expectancy. So you may be building a building that you may finance over a 20-year period, but that building may last for 30 years. You're paying for a road project and the county's practice is to pay over a 10-year period. That road will probably last much longer than that. And as well as any smaller items that you may finance, and we'll talk a little bit about how the county's practice has been for structuring and paying for things. But what debt issuance does is it pays for the project over a period of time. So you're not burdening your current and your previous taxpayers for that expense. You're allowing the people who are going to benefit from it out into the future, that maybe new citizens to this community or new businesses to this community, help pay for those project costs or help subsidize the cost of paying for that. And in Kenosha County, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, is a prime location for future economic development. So there's the likelihood of new taxpayers moving in, new businesses moving in, and a need to put infrastructure in place to accommodate some of that is going to be facing you perhaps at some point, and this allows those new businesses to pay for that infrastructure and not putting it all on your current residents. The other thing that we see, and we monitor this on an annual basis, is there any outstanding debt you have that would benefit you by doing a refinancing? So much like if you have a mortgage and interest rates are at a lower point now than they were when you initially borrowed it, you can look at refinancing it, and we do that to save money, and we've done that frequently here at the county. So, you know, and kind of in summary too, it enhances your ability to pay for large projects and get those underway. It also want to point out that it's important if you're going to issue debt to manage that effectively, and the best way to do that is if you as issuers understand a few basic components, and that is what your financing options are, the basic rules and regulations, which I hope to cover this evening, who the players are when you issue debt. We'll talk about the individuals that are involved in the process, how bonds are sold in the market, and you know, the plan for current and future financing. And I applaud the county because they do have a long-range capital plan. So on an annual basis, you look at your future capital needs for the next year, and those are usually the ones you're identifying that you're going to pay for in one way, shape, or form. But you also have a 5-year plan ahead of you. So as we plan for the current year, we're also addressing and looking at the impact of the future borrowings in addition to what your current capital projects are. So much like an individual borrowing money for a home or a car or something like that, municipal debt must be secured by something. So there's generally 2 types of municipal financing that we look at. One is general obligation, most commonly referred to as GO. So when you hear GO, it's general obligation debt. It can be taxable or tax exempt, and by that I mean the investor or the purchaser of those bonds, the interest that you pay, the investor will either pay taxes on that or it will be exempt from federal taxes. That helps tax exempt for street projects, municipal projects, county projects, drives that interest rate down. So it's a reasonable way to pay for projects. So basically what's happening is you're backing that, the backing for that or the security to that debt is your tax base. You're pledging your full faith and credit of your taxing body. So this is what gives it the cheapest cost of money, the lowest interest rate, the most secure pledge there is. So you're committing that you will raise taxes if you don't have other revenues to help pay for that debt service. The second one is revenue bonds. The county doesn't really get involved in this too much. I think a number of years ago there was a revenue bond issued for a golf course here that has since been refinanced at a lower cost of interest with general obligation. In those cases, you're pledging the revenue source, and in that case, it would have been the revenue from the golf course. We see it in municipalities for utilities, water, sewer district utility revenues. It carries a higher cost of interest and a higher cost of doing the financing because that security is more risky to the investor than a tax-supported debt. So here in Wisconsin, it's statutory chapter 67 that governs the issuance of debt for all governments in the state. And statutorily, every government is limited to the amount of GO debt they can have outstanding. So it's 5% of your equalized value or your market value of all the property within the county, including the value of within any tax increment district. So just to put this in perspective, at the end of 2017, because the only numbers we have that are firmed right now are 1/117 values, the county's borrowing limit was $732,754,650. Kenosha has a policy that you adopted a number of years ago that self-imposes a limitation on that. So your limitation in your policy is only 20% of that allowable limit. So as of 12/31/17, that self-imposed limit would have had you at $146,550,000. So substantially lower than your statutory ability to borrow debt. And your outstanding debt at that point in time was about $127 million. So you're well within your imposed policy. Interestingly enough, you could go out and borrow another $605 million, not that you would do that. So you have about 82.5% of your borrowing capacity still remaining. And as your advisors, we would advise that you don't do that. So there are rules that are in place, and the most important ones that affect you in making decisions are the state regulations. So when we talk about general obligation, By statute, the max you can borrow under general obligation is 20 years. Now, there's two different instruments. There's promissory notes, which are up to 10 years, and there's bonds, which are up to 20 years. Here at the county, you basically capital finance all of your bond, or all of your projects, your capital projects, within 10 years. So you aggressively pay back that debt. Now, I want to point out that you may have things in your capital plan that aren't going to be here 10 years from now. So you're not paying for those over 10 years. The debt is structured so you're amortizing shorter-term capital life over a shorter-term financing. It's just rolled up into one 10-year issue. So if you've got a piece of equipment, a fire truck or a garbage truck or whatever that you may have for 15 years, that's being amortized over 15 years. Well, it could be in a bond. It's being amortized over its life. So we're matching the useful life of the asset with the debt service that's being paid. And revenue bonds can go out to 40. Again, this isn't something that you'd be typically involved with, and that's driven by how much the market would support. So again, there's the 10-year notes, and they can be for any public purpose. So you have flexibility with your notes. You can borrow the money. You can use it for various things. You're not so much committed. If you underspend on one project, you can use those remaining dollars for something else. Under bonds, they're a little more restricted by purpose. So when you issue bonds, you specifically have to identify what you're paying for. Now, the county has issued bonds for the Brookside facility. They issue bonds for public safety building. You issue bonds for some of the work, well, I don't even know if the work on this building might have even been notes, but some of the major long-term, infrastructure building type things you've been financing over a longer period of time. Now, I mentioned earlier that this levy limit issue comes into play. So if you're using cash or levying to use cash on an annual basis for paying for projects, it is subject to levy limits. So you may be finding yourself in a situation that you have to trade it off for personnel or for services that you provide. And so issuance of debt allows you to take on projects that may need to be done and keep you out of that restriction and keep you out of making decisions to trade that off for something else that may be equally as important to the community. And also, levy limits are restrictive enough that it almost prevents you from doing capital financing with that mechanism any longer. So who's involved when the issuance of debt is, there's a few other little players involved in this, but the primary is the municipal advisors. That's us at Ellers. We work with you. I'll talk a little bit more about our role in a moment, but we get paid through the fees that are in the issuance of debt. You have a bond counsel who serves as Foley and Lardner. Your debt is rated with a credit agency, and you have that done with Standard & Poor's and Fitch. And the purchaser is when we issue debt for the county, we do it on a competitive basis, so it's the winning bidder. And if you do have a paying agent, you have some with Bond Trust Services, or that you're doing that process yourself. So it's important to understand who they are and how they get paid. So Ellers, we have a fiduciary responsibility to you. So we put your interest ahead of ours. We help you understand your options. We have developed the plan, we developed the structure, we take care of the execution of the sale, or if we were to do a negotiated issue, which in my duration, we have not done. We've done everything on a competitive basis. It helps to have your bond rating where it is at. And so again, we exclusively work for the county. We don't have any relationships with any underwriters or any banks. The bond attorney and Foley and Lardner serve in that capacity. They prepare all the legal documents. They make the finding that it meets the federal requirements, meets the state requirements. It is a tax-exempt financing, so they do all that. They draft the legal documents, all the resolutions that you'd be considering, and they assist in closing the transaction. They're paid a flat fee for that service, and that's all disclosed to you up front, as well as ours. It's a flat fee for that service, and we disclose that to you up front. The purchaser, again, then is the buyer of the bonds, or the investor. So generally, they're purchased by an underwriter or a broker-dealer firm. It's an underwriter, a Robert W. Baird. Banks will participate in the market, BOK Financial, various bond customers. And they typically will resell to either institutions or individuals. They're paid a fee, which is called an underwriter discount, and that is typically $1 per dollar expressed per bond. So if you pay a $10 discount on a $1 million issue, they would keep that $10,000 and give you the balance, so it's taken off at the top of the transaction. When you do a competitive issue, that's a negotiated item. So in addition to an underwriter bidding on your interest, they're also bidding on that underwriter fee. The rating agencies, as I mentioned before, there's three primary ones within the Wisconsin market: Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Moody's. You currently have rating with Standard & Poor's and Fitch. Why is a rating important? It's much like your individual credit score. The higher your score, the better your interest rates that you pay when you borrow money. So it gives you an investor sees a more secure investment because you have a high rating, and they are willing to give you a lower interest rate, or take a lower interest rate on their investment in your bonds. The rating agency is, again, a flat fee up front that's disclosed to you in the bonding, and it's paid for with the proceeds. A paying agent, again, they facilitate the annual payments. The county serves as their own paying agent in many issues. The only time we typically have a paid paying agent is if there are term bonds which complicate the payment of the issue. And that, again, can either be paid sometimes up front and sometimes over the course of the issue. So as far as structuring debt, I mentioned already that when we structure your payments, we look at the assets we're purchasing or the equipment we're purchasing or the project we're paying through, and we structure that based upon its useful life. And generally, you'll see when debt is issued, they're either level payments, principal and interest on an annual basis are level, much like your mortgage payment. You pay the same amount every month or every year, and bonds can be structured that way. Or we do what we call a wraparound, and what it does is accommodates your outstanding debt. So we'll always look at what your existing debt service payments and any new borrowing or future planned borrowing, and we look at the impact that that's going to have on an annual basis for your taxpayers. So we can control that impact on an annual basis. So when you see a financing plan from us, you'll see that we focus on the levy every year and the tax rate every year, so you can see the impact that will have. Again, we match the debt payments with the asset life, and it allows you to better control the dollars that you're taxing for on an annual basis by doing this structured issue or wrapping it around. Now, the good news is the county aggressively pays off their debt, so they're paying off a lot of principal every year, and it allows you that flexibility as well to pay for the projects and pay future debt off a little earlier as well. So again, that structuring practice, in the county's practice has been to kind of focus on the levy and the tax rate and the affordability of issuing debt. You do have policies and guidelines in place. They were last amended, I think, in 2012, maybe. So there are a few targets that you set in those guidelines, and we look at that every year to make sure you're staying within those policies. And one is, how much is your debt service payment related to your operating expenses? That's set at 15%. In 2007, you were just over 8%, so you're well within that parameter. We also look at that tax rate impact. Your policies have said they will not exceed $1.50 a thousand. In 2017, you were at $1.18, and that's per thousand. It's kind of a mill rate, the per $1,000 of tax rate. So the process of doing bonds, and you'll be involved in this when we get to the budgeting time of in the fall, is you will adopt an initial resolution authorizing the sale, and the county's practice has been to consider that at the time you adopt your capital budget, so that you have a financing plan in place in order to start out the first of the year and undertake your capital projects. And that's done by resolution. And now there's different ways of accomplishing that, but the practice here has always been to strive for at least a 3/4 vote of the members elect. So, there's a tally at the time of the vote to make sure that you meet that and you can move forward and issue it. And then the day of the sale, when we've taken bids, come back with a formal process, there's a resolution that will be adopted at that point as well. I mentioned you have a credit rating. The credit agencies focus on 4 areas: your economy, your management, your debt profile, and your financial operations. And they score you on each one of those components. So the way the rating agencies, and each one of them has a little bit different number score, S&P and Fitch are basically the same. The highest rating you can have is a AAA rating. Now, Kenosha County, and I applaud you, has a AA+ rating. So that high rating equates to the low interest rates that you pay on your bonds. And I'll give you some examples of where some of your outstanding debt is at. So the county has done a great job of maintaining that and striving to improve it whenever it can. So I won't go through all of these, but the Kenosha 2 ratings, Fitch has you as a AA+, and S&P also is a AA+. When you get this PowerPoint, these are some of the focuses that and how they've scored you on each one of those components. So I think you probably have access to your rating reports as well, and they're worth reading. It's very, very interesting. So when we get to the day of selling your bonds, in the commercial market, it requires a preparation of a preliminary official statements. It's like if you do an investment, it's a prospectus that an investor looks at. It looks just like that. It has information about the demographics of the county, the economic development changes in the county, the financial position. It's a very useful document, and it's very important that that information is accurate and reflected and disclosed properly. So then the advisor will send that out to the market. On a competitive basis, we receive bids, or if we're negotiating it, it's with a specific purchaser. We make adjustments to that bid, and then we would come to a meeting with a resolution that the bond council's approved or prepared so that you can finalize that sale. And then about 2 to 4 weeks later, you have your cash and can use that to pay for projects. Here's a little bit of history of the debt that you currently have outstanding. So, some of these were borrowed over 20 years. These are the courthouse project, the Brookside Center, Law Enforcement Center, and the TIC is the average interest rates, because each maturity holds its own interest rate. We look at an average. It includes that underwriter discount, because that's that bid item as well. So you can see that your 20-year debt, you've been well under 4%. Even lower. We did some refinancing, so your public safety building that still has 15 years remaining when it was refinanced is at 2.4. Your administrative building was at a 10-year at a 199. That was in 14. And then the average of all your 10-year capital project financings has been about just above 2%. So, that is reflective of that positive credit score that you have from your bonding or rating agencies. So again, we on an annual basis look at opportunities to refinance, to save money. You're at some pretty good rates. You probably won't see us coming forward with that too frequently, but every bond issue has a call provision, and you can refinance it within 90 days of that and have it be a current refinancing. There's been some changes in the federal law that no longer allow us to do an advance refunding, which is some of the things we've done in advance where you borrow and put it in an escrow, but that's changed under new federal laws. So, in summary, to kind of wrap it up, some of the things that the rating agency focuses on, and you have strong management and management practices for your debt. You have adopted a policy that is not only your general obligation debt, but any other long-term obligations you have. You have post-employment benefits that you pay for retirees, which is an obligation that you would need to meet in the future. You have leave accruals for earned vacation and sick. So your policy doesn't just address your GO, but it looks at all of that. And I can tell you that as of today, those outstanding obligations are lower than what they were back in 2010. So that shows that there's been a lot of effort to control that overall cost of future obligations. You do have a 5-year capital plan that's reviewed annually, and also annually you review that you're within compliance with that debt policy. So when we come to you this fall to talk about your future capital plan for 2019, you will see a table that shows where you stand and how you are comparing to all those benchmarks that you established in your policy. It's important to the rating agencies that you have these things in place and that you're monitoring to stay within those. You also have a good track record for those things you can control to improve on them, and that is reflected in the high score that you have. So, it's always an ambition to even raise it higher, and hopefully we'll be here someday to tell you you've moved to that top of the line, the AAA. And the county has done a good job of maintaining its relationship with those rating agencies. There's back and forth dialogue that goes on at different times throughout the year, and a one-to-one person conversation when you do go to the market and you're issuing debt. So I think that has been very key and very helpful for the debt planning. So that concludes my planned comments. I don't know if we have any time for questions.
Do any supervisors have any questions for Dawn at this time? You want to? I'll go in order. Supervisor Nordigan, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions about, it's actually the presentation more than anything. You showed on the rate history, is that all the outstanding debt there is?
Yeah, you actually, you have one small taxable issue from 2010 that I didn't reflect on there because there's only like one or two maturities, but everything else you have was issued either in 2011 or later. So,
And it looks like you have it separated out into our different departments and our different divisions, so you know
where the money was borrowed
so
for.
you have that split up, so golf course, Kemper Center, anything like that.
Right.
If there was borrowed money out there that wasn't paid back as outstanding, that would have been on that
Yes,
screen?
yes.
So that stuff's all paid off?
Yes.
Okay. What's considered a long life project in years, I guess?
Well, you know, how long has your courthouse been? When you look at buildings that can be here 50 years from now, so what the general obligation would allow you to borrow for 20 years.
But a 3-year
Oh, I see
police
what you're
car
saying.
wouldn't be considered,
Generally, those are rolled up, they're financed over, you know, a shorter period of time, but you're not trading your operation dollars for that type of equipment. So, you know, most of us will borrow for a car, and in the case of the county, you know, you're paying off as you're bringing on, so it's a real short-term amortization.
okay, so it's not going over the 10
No,
years or 20
definitely
years?
not, definitely
Okay.
not.
And then, you know, you said sometimes refinancing a debt at a lower percent, but if you're going to refinance it over a lot more years, you have an added cost.
And that's never been a practice. So when a debt issue's been refinanced at the county, you never
remaining
increase.
years
The
is what's-
remaining years
okay.
stay. So if you've got 10 years left, you refinance it for 10 years. You know, there may be rare circumstances that you would want to adjust this annual structure, but that's never happened here. It's
Okay.
always been within the terms of the original issue.
Oh, and excuse the questions, because
That's fine.
been a long time since I've been through this. So the other example, or what you showed up there, the 8.12% of expenditures and the $1.18 for the $1,000 mill rate, that's total of all the debt through 2017? That wasn't just 2017
It's
debt?
everything up through 2017.
Okay, that's all I
All
took,
your
but I
annual
just wanted to
payments.
verify that. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Sklicki, you have the floor.
We're at AA plus and we're trying to achieve AAA. And I realize in the competitive bidding market, you're going to have a little bit fluctuation in rates. Can you give this body a sense of what it will mean in reduction of interest rates? Or is it?
And that it changes over time, you know, as interest rates rise and the spread between those would get greater, you probably are looking anywhere between 5 and 10 basis points. So if you're borrowing, I don't try to do this math in my head, but if you're borrowing, you know, $12 million, which may be what you're doing, I mean, that can add up even 5 or 10 basis points. So it's certainly a goal. There are things that probably would hold you back from that. I mean, we had a period of time when the overall EVs had dropped a little bit, but those are coming back up, and as those continue to grow, and as your demographics, your value per capita of your property values, your income per capita, as those things grow, those would be the one things that help boost that credit rating. And you know, your strong liquidity, they comment about how strong you are liquidity, you know, you have a good reserve policy, and that's important. You know, you're not as high as many that have that higher rating, you're not as high as many that are even in the rating class that you are, but it's important to maintain that, and it allows the investors and the rating agency to recognize that there's something there in case something unforeseen happens, and you can address those.
Okay, so in general, 5 or 10 basis points.
At this time.
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah, at this time, again, that changes over time.
Thank you.
but-
Thank you. Supervisor Nichol?
Well, actually, Supervisor Skaliski asked the same question I was going to ask, but I have another one. You say the initial resolution calls for a 3/4 vote. What about the sale resolution? I don't
No,
know.
once the initial resolution is authorized, the sale resolution is only a majority of the vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. One of the things that we have kind of wrestled with a little bit is like, to get this AAA rating, we've been told the bond rating agents want to have a pretty substantial reserve on our general revenue fund. And that's understood. But my question is it worth chasing that for, now I don't mean to disrupt you, but I was told the difference is 2 basis points from AAA to, okay, I was told that.
Usually when you jump between classes, it's, but again, that changes, so.
That's not my point. Is it worth constantly chasing, having our general revenue fund so thick and reserved that we can't touch it for things that we could maybe purchase instead of bonding? Curious on your opinion on that, just what you think.
I think that once you've gotten to that level that I think it's, having the AAA will be a definite value. Some of the other things will help you get there as well, not just that fund balance, but once it's there, then you can establish the reasons when you would use it, and you should never use it for operations. It's like you're having a savings account, and why would you pay for your groceries out of savings or whatever? It's eventually going to go away. So, you're really still kind of on the low end of most county governments, even in your own rating class. I was reviewing some of that today, and there's a lot that have a higher fund balance than you do. So, I think it's a good goal to have. I think it will, it may happen in time, maybe longer time than my duration. I don't know, but I think it's something that I think you have to evaluate whether the importance of that.
That's all you got? Supervisor Gantz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly disagree with you. I think you'll see us be AAA. And
Well, I hope so.
Okay, let's think positive.
Okay.
I
I think your growth will certainly help you in that. I think the future that you have here in a county for your economics and is certainly well.
How many municipalities do you work with, roughly?
Our company, our firm
Yeah.
here in Wisconsin, 375 to 400.
Okay, all right. Do the majority of those have self-imposed limits like we do? And are they are ours strict on ourselves? Or, I'm trying to show the board that, the things that we can control, we are controlling to help our constituents.
Yeah,
So, go
you
ahead.
do have, a lot of times it depends on size, so smaller governments can't put those restrictions because they have capital needs that they have to do, but yours are pretty restrictive, so I think that's an example, and having those policies and those strict self-imposing limitations do serve you well. I think you've moved up to the AA1, now that's probably more of a, 3 to 5 basis points between the 2 and the 1, but you move between classes, like a A to a AA or AA to a AAA, I think is going to equate to real dollars.
And there are only a certain number of things that we can control, one of them being our reserve, that will impact that number.
Yep.
And ultimately, the interest rate that we borrow money at is going to directly help our constituents.
That's
because we're
correct.
saving money.
That's correct.
And also, I'd like to point out that, those who are a little nervous about borrowing, we're going to spend, the money we're borrowing and bonding for are things that we have to do. It's not like we're trying to put up streetcars or fountains or stuff like that. These are things that are brick and mortar things that we're going to have to do. So our choice is to use our reserve or pay out of our pocket and pay the cash and put it on the tax levy or bond it at this phenomenal interest rate. So, I just want to compliment the county board on the last, the 10 years I've been on it for our fiscal responsibility and how we've been doing it. And I want to make sure everybody understands that, you can give the gloss over of this, but what it really means to the constituents that we have and represent is we're saving them money.
Correct.
Correct?
Controlling those costs, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gantz. Supervisor Holman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for chuckling. I respect my colleague, but I've seen the property values in Milwaukee go through the roof for streetcars, and I think a fountain would be very nice in the park outside, so I slightly disagree. But I want to say thank you to Ms. Gunderson for giving the presentation and the work that you do at Ellers. You know, you hear a lot of things on the television. I turned to Supervisor Grady and I said, it appears that Susie Orman is quite correct, so thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Holman. Now, Supervisor Nordigan, you have something, and then we're going to wrap it up. And any other questions any other supervisors have, they can contact Ellers directly. Go ahead, Supervisor Nordigan.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up for the other ways of getting our credit rating up to AAA, also, I think on there it showed debt load, the amount of debt you have as well. So,
Which you are controlling.
which we are controlling, but, you know, not that we can't always do better. Yes, I agree. We're doing things that we have to do, but I think there might be some wiggle room in there from other things that we don't, that may help us get there, and it isn't just increasing surplus and that. So there's some areas that we can look at as well there too. So just want to bring that, it's one other area. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate your presentation. I want to thank Patty and Barnum from the Finance Administration. And we're going to move on to supervisor reports. I'm going to clear the board here. Again, any supervisor reports at this time?
All right, I will try to keep this short. I'm going to be giving a report on our trip to D.C., but at first I want to address our citizen who came in and spoke tonight, Mr. Namath, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. I had an opportunity to speak with him last night. The inmate in question, if that is the proper term for what we call those incarcerated within the Kenosha County jail system, I did reach out to Lieutenant Ruth over at the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, and he did let me know that the Sheriff's Department and their medical staff is doing everything in their power to make sure that the inmate, his name is Jose Ramirez, is getting the treatment that he is requesting, and if he does in fact need it, because too often, you know, as we can all agree upon, some of these inmates are asking for medication and services that they do not in fact need. But I did want to thank Mr. Namath for bringing that to an attention, because if that wasn't the case, that's something that we need to address, because that's a serious issue. Moving on to D.C., Supervisors Nudo, Poole, Nordigan, Skalitsky, Decker, and myself made the travel out to D.C. to represent the Kenosha County Board and the county executive at the conference that the White House put on for Wisconsin counties. Just a little fun fact, we're the largest group from the furthest state away, so, you know, way to go, Wisconsin. And I'm going to burn through some of these facts, try to keep it as short as I can. Right now, only 30% of the vets throughout our country are signed up, part of the VA system. We need to do more, and I know Kenosha County is doing a lot, but at least 70% of current vets and former servicemen and women who earned these services and aren't currently enrolled in them. Moving on, one of the biggest things that I feel impacted the county, along with most of the nation that they talked about, was opioids. Deaths in this country went up from 52,000 in 2016 to 68,000 in 2017, and that's just an astounding number. And, you know, as a community, we need to do, and like I addressed in the previous issue, we are doing a lot here in Kenosha County, but we need to continue fighting to make sure these things stop happening. We've had 20,000 Americans die of fentanyl. This recent take-back day that we had a few weeks ago, maybe it was a month or so ago now, 943,000 pounds of prescription medication were taken back, and that is the largest that has ever happened. The federal government has made a commitment to this. Funding is up from $500,000 to fight this epidemic, and is now sitting at roughly $6 billion. And then Supervisor Skalitsky and myself had the opportunity to speak with the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, you know, regarding issues facing Kenosha County citizens, and, you know, more so citizens in districts like Skalitsky's, and not so much myself in the city, but issues that they're having with living in a more rural part of the county, and, you know, and throughout the state. And I do have a handout that they gave to us with contacts for every department at the federal level, with contacts, so that we can have someone to call or email, and I will get that to you guys tomorrow. And then we did have an opportunity to speak with Ron Johnson. With him, we talked about the new tax bill, Foxconn, and health insurance, especially that relating to his bill, right to try that was passed. Supervisor Skalitsky, Nero, and myself went to Tammy Baldwin's office, and we were unable to schedule a meeting with her. She wasn't available to do that, but we did give them our information, knowing that, should she have an issue or should we have an issue, we would, we did the same thing for Ron Johnson, we did the same thing for Tammy Baldwin, work together. And we did meet with Paul Ryan's Chief of Staff, Andy Speth, and we, with him, talked about mostly infrastructure and taxes and other issues facing the county. And I will wrap it up here. I know I'm trying not to go too long. We've got some pretty amazing stats for the economy right now. And whether you want to give this achievement to the current administration or previous administration, mix of both, we've got an 18-year startup high for small businesses, and I think we see a lot of that in Kenosha County. I come from a family of a small business. Many of us know small business owners. Jobless claims are at a 45-year low. Unemployment is at an 18-year low. And a fun fact that I think surprised all of us that attended the meeting was Wisconsin is the nation's 16th largest exporter, stateside at least, like at a state level. And I think we should be proud of that, and we can definitely, I think, as a whole state, improve that. But I think that is all. So hopefully that was short enough. I didn't ramble on too long.
Fantastic. Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Supervisor Gray, do you have the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Human Services Committee had their meeting this evening at the medical examiner's office. Took a tour of the facility. Quite interesting. We also approved a couple of appointees for the Brookside Board of Trustees. They are lacking in their membership, so we'll see those before you this evening. And then also our next meeting is scheduled for the 10th of next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Alberman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. We had a joint meeting tonight with Finance to talk about a new exciting phase in our public-private partnerships in the Park Division. An aerial adventure group approached the county. We approved that in a joint committee meeting this evening. We'll have all the details for you in 2 weeks when we ask the county board to also approve it. Our major building construction is in full swing right now with the public safety building and the pretrial roof across the street. Branch 1 courtroom renovation will be in November, and the Anderson House reservation project is design engineering activities right now, 2019 project. Highway is in their full paving schedule. Kemper Center, the rental loss for small startup businesses or existing businesses are complete. There's a couple punch list items. I'm sure they'll be marketing them shortly. Golf, we've made up a lot of the lost time through our marketing, and we seem to be on the road to another very good year there. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alberman. Supervisor Norton, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a follow-up on to what Supervisor Rodriguez had brought up, not as intense and not as in-depth. It's just more of a overall, we have 72 counties in the state, and I was kind of disappointed there was only about 100 people at this White House gathering. Now, short notice, and I know a lot of people were busy, couldn't get off work, or whatever the case is. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. If it ever comes up again, to go. It is very well worth it. Some of our neighbors, Milwaukee County, Racine County, of course us, Marquette County, Door County, I think it was Buffalo County, for sure were there, very small contingencies of them. But to get these 34 individuals' names, departments, phone numbers, email address for us, the county board, to contact based on either what we're hearing is coming out of Washington or what we want them to hear based on what it's going to, or how it's going to affect our constituents, I think was something just special that and I know Zach said he's going to go ahead and distribute those. But I just can't tell you how informational and how I felt important it was to the county for us to be there. As they said it, is you're so close to your constituents, they probably not only know where you live, but they know what you drive. So they understand where we're at, and I think they are true to what they say, that they want to hear from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Boyd-Frederick, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just a reminder, tomorrow evening after the Judiciary and Law meeting, we are getting a tour of the Public Safety Building. Any new supervisors, please come along and join us. That way you're seeing where all the facility and how it works within Kenosha County. I also left it on one's desk because the dark source is coming up so often with this, and we have resolutions that will be coming to the Ledge Committee. Is Senator Wirtz is having to talk about it on the 13th, and so if anyone has questions from him, they can ask him at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Seeing no more supervisor reports are closed. County Clerk.
County Executive Appointments, Paul Mueller to serve on the Kenosha County Workforce Development Board.
Refer to Human Services.
Carson Wilkinson to serve on the Kenosha County Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Refer to Judiciary and Law.
Judy Jensen to serve on the Brookside Board of Trustees.
The appointments of Judy Jensen and Barb Wisniewski were heard by the Human Services Committee earlier this evening, and they are on the board's agenda for later this evening.
Ordinance, second reading to required from Finance and Administration Committee, an ordinance to amend MCKC 4.01, the Civil Service Ordinance. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. Gens, yes. Retzloff, yes. Kubicki, yes. O'Day, yes. Gable, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the legislation before you.
We have ordinance moved by Supervisor Rose and a second by Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rose.
All right, thank you. The entire ordinance is listed on your agenda. What we have here this evening are some changes to that, and the most significant changes are these. As you probably know, veterans are given certain points when they apply for the position of deputy sheriff. The Civil Service Commission is the commission which makes recommendations to the sheriff of those candidates they believe are most qualified to serve as a deputy sheriff, and then the sheriff selects from that list submitted. The applicants go through a series of tests, physical, mental, and part of that involves being assigned points to achieve a recommendation to the sheriff. Veterans receive an extra points, but we've added two categories to that list of individuals who will receive extra points for consideration. One, if you have served as a law enforcement officer for some other department, you will receive 5 additional points. Current employees of Kenosha County will receive additional 3 points. Those are new categories of extra points. The second part change in the Civil Service Ordinance is what is called a multiple assessment, and before you were assigned points, now it is a pass and fail system. Both of these changes have been recommended by the Personnel Department, Civil Service Commission. The committee has reviewed them and approved them, and we offer them for your approval and support this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. There is some discussion. Supervisor Retzloff, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to have this ordinance pulled and sent to the Judicial and Law Committee for review. And it's not that I'm against a lot of it. It has to do with this commission. This Supervisor Rose mentioned it. He said they start the process, not the Sheriff's Department. I have a problem with that. I really would like us to review this and talk to some of these people to get a better understanding. We've been doing this for a long time. I think it's our obligation as supervisors to look at procedures that we do around here and just maybe get a better hand on it. Is this the best way? Is this slowing down interviewing processes? I talked to the sheriff about this, and he isn't real big on it, the commission, but that's not necessarily important right now. I am just asking that we send this to the committee. We can go through a couple of these things and just be more comfortable with this commission structure that we have. And that's the recommendation I'm making. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm clear you're making a motion to refer to the judiciary and law committee?
Yes.
Can I have a second on the motion? There's a second. We'll open that up for discussion at this time in regards to referring it to the judiciary and law committee. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. I'm going to oppose the recommendation. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the Judiciary and Law Committee or the Finance Administration Committee to review the overall procedures from time to time. But to send this whole ordinance based upon two changes that we suggest really is counterproductive. Right now, the Civil Service Commission makes the recommendations to the sheriff for the selection of deputy sheriff candidates. What Supervisor Retzloff is suggesting is not really opposition to what the committee, Finance Administration Committee, has recommended to you. He has recommended his referral, and please understand the difference, his referral is to take a look at the overall method by which deputy sheriff applicants are selected. Right now, they are selected and recommended by the Civil Service Commission. The commission is appointed by the county executive. The members of that commission then come to the county board as an appointment by the executive. We approve or disapprove their selection, and then if we approve them, they go on to commission, and their sole responsibility is to make up this list of deputy sheriff applicants who the sheriff selects from. They go through a rigorous process. We've talked about the extra points here. They go through a face-to-face interview. There's a written part. There's a physical part. That's all part of going on the recommended list. Now, we're only asking for a couple of changes here, not an overall review and replacement of that system. I think that's what Supervisor Retzloff is aiming at when he says, let's recommend it to the Judiciary and Law Committee. There is another way of selection of deputy sheriff candidates. The Civil Service Commission is statutory. It's one method by which deputy sheriff candidates are recommended to the sheriff. Another way is to abolish the Civil Service Commission entirely. That's really what Supervisor Retzloff is saying, let's take a look at abolishment of the Civil Service Commission. And replace it, for example, with the Personnel Department reviewing the selections and making recommendations to the sheriff. Without this Civil Service Commission, a group of citizens who reviews the applicants. Either method is certainly statutorily possible, but I would say that if you're going to take a look at the entire process, which is an administration committee function, it's a judiciary and law committee function, you're really going to slow down the process right now in reviewing the suggestions that the administration committee makes to you this evening on two small issues, the extra point and the multiple assessment. We're not overhauling the entire method by which we select deputy sheriffs. You can still amend the ordinance, which I'm suggesting you pass this evening, so that the selection process for deputy sheriffs is not slowed down. If you want to take a look and study the whole issue of what is the best method by which deputy sheriffs are selected, be it the civil service ordinance process, which is statutory, or an alternative method, having the personnel director and his staff review those as we review other applicants for Kenosha County employment, we can do that at some later date. But that's not anything that we refer to the Judiciary Law Committee and the Administration Committee and take a look at for 1 hour and then come back with you with a complete overhaul of the system. thereby slowing down the whole process of selection of deputy sheriffs. So I would suggest this evening that you reject the idea of referral to the committee, that you pass these two amendments to the Civil Service Commission ordinance so that the selection of deputy sheriffs is not slowed down. There's no point in doing that whatsoever. If you want to take a look at, is this the best method, we can take a look at that, and I'm the chair of the Administration Committee as part of the Finance Committee. Judiciary and Law Committee can take a look at that, but that's a big, big issue that requires far more study than a brief referral and then come back to the committee with the board with a complete overall. I think that would be indeed counterproductive. It'll slow down the selection process for deputy sheriffs, and I don't think that that's what we want to do in today's environment. So I urge you this evening to reject the referral and to support the committee's recommendation and the administration's recommendation that the civil service ordinance be amended in the two small ways that I have selected. And if you want to take an overall look at reorganization, you do that, but not this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Kulicki, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't remember hearing Supervisor Retzloff making a motion to scrap the entire process. He's simply asking for an important document to be reviewed by a committee that has oversight and it directly affects us, and that's why I supported referral to the committee. I don't think that it's unreasonable to have the committee that oversees the area that's affected by this ordinance, which, as I reviewed it, I don't know when the last time it has been reviewed or maybe updated. Perhaps there's a couple other areas that could use some input, and maybe they've already been talking or received from the Sheriff's Department, but I would like to see the committee that's in charge or oversees this area at least have a chance to review this ordinance. I don't think we've got a crisis on our hands with regards to the hiring process. It's the first time it's come up, and so I'm going to support the motion to refer this back to the Judiciary and Law Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kulicki. Supervisor Gens, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to respond to Supervisor Skulicki, that is exactly what Supervisor Retzloff was talking about in the committee meeting. So he didn't say that in his referral, but that's what he was looking at, was the whole procedure of the Civil Service Commission and whether or not it was needed. And I don't want to make this a habit, but I happen to agree with Supervisor Rose that this is for a few specific items, and I don't, even in his referral, Supervisor Retzloff did not say he was against the pieces of what we're trying to do here. And I do support looking at all of our policies and procedures, so I have no problem doing that. But I do think it's counterproductive to not move this forward and then look at the big picture down the road. We don't even have to wait a long time to do that. We can get it on agendas fairly quickly. But I think that we ought to just move these small changes now forward, and if we want to analyze the big picture of how the Civil Service Commission fits into our structure, we can do that at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gens. Supervisor Boyd Frederick.
Chairman, what I would suggest right now is we go ahead and let the changes go through, and as the chairman of Judiciary and Law, I will put it on the July meeting to go look at the whole document. That way Supervisor Retzloff is able to get this whole thing taken care of, and we can do the changes tonight. Is that feasible?
To the maker of the motion, is that okay with you, or do you want to go through with the process? Supervisor Retzloff.
I'm wrestling with that. I don't want to slow down the process of hiring our deputies. I don't. But they meet with 15 people during the interview process. 15. This committee is made up of individuals in the community, which is fine, but the problem I have is they're the ones that start it, not the Sheriff's Department. It'd be like me, I'm an insurance salesman. What do I know about a deputy? Granted, he has to take tests, he has to pass a bunch of tests, or a bunch of psychiatric exams, etc. I don't know the exact process, and maybe I'm asking for your guidance on the best way to do this, but I really question why we have to have this committee. That's all I'm looking at, and the best way to do that is, I'm not sure, maybe Supervisor Frederick's idea is fine. I'm open, so I would like to leave the motion as is.
Okay, we're going to leave the motion as is, Supervisor Frederick. Do you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
Yes, I just want to bring to the board's attention that the Civil Service Commission is under the jurisdiction, and always has been under the jurisdiction, of the Administration Committee. It is not under the Judiciary and Law Committee. Those are the rules of this board. If you want to change those rules, you certainly can. But it's not like we've taken some sort of renegade position here and elbowed everybody else out. We deal with the appointments to the Civil Service Commission. It is a statutory commission. It's not the only way that people can be selected, but it is the long-standing method, and there, again, no point in slowing down the process here and amending it for the benefit of Kenosha County employees and former law enforcement officers from other communities who might get a few extra points under the selection process, and by having the multiple assessment process on a pass-fail basis, one doesn't have to have a revolution at this point in time to effectuate those changes with the support of this committee. So the issue here tonight is not, do we have a complete reorganization of the Civil Service Commission, which nobody, incidentally, has ever complained about in the time that I have served on this county board, except this evening we want to suddenly reorganize the entire process and take a look at that. No point to it, and I would say reject the referral, support the recommendation.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. I'm going to clear the board here. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
I guess I'm in favor of this resolution going to before the Judiciary and Law Committee for a different view to look over these changes. As my sister is a former police officer, and my brother-in-law is a former police officer, and those few points can make or break someone's getting hired or not. And to look at someone just because they are a county employee, to give them a bonus points because they're a county employee, that they might get extra points with someone that is more qualified than them just because they're a county employee. I think that's something that should be looked at by members of the Judiciary and Law Committee and members of the Sheriff's Department to see if that's actually something that serves as a good policy for hiring sheriff's deputies. Is it a good policy to give bonus points to someone that maybe, is serving beverages at the golf course? Are they more qualified than someone else? Should they get extra points? My brother-in-law waited 2.5 years to see if he got a job as a City of Milwaukee police officer, and he didn't. And he knew every point mattered. And those points are important, and it seems like some members of the Finance and Administration Committee thinks that those aren't a big deal. They are a big deal when you're trying to get a job as a sheriff's deputy. So that's why I'd like the Judiciary and Law Committee to take it up, because they have a different perspective than the Finance and Administration Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Rose.
Just to repeat what I said before, law enforcement officers from other communities will receive 5 additional points. We're also according 3 additional points to employees so that people, for example, who work at the jails as correctional officers who have experience in that law enforcement field get some credit not as much as a former law enforcement officer from some other community, but we're also giving them some credit as correctional officers. That's the intent here. That's the recommendation that the administration, as well as the administration committee, who has traditionally dealt with this kind of personnel issue.
Thank you, Supervisor Rules. Supervisor Kulisky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think of it this way, just like oil lamps and candles have been around for decades, hundreds of years. Eventually, it was time to update and move to something a little bit more in time or a little bit more convenient. I look at the Service Commission, nobody's complaining about it, but has anybody really asked, is this the best way to conduct our hiring practices in the 21st century in a very competitive marketplace? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. This is an opportunity to review this ordinance, and if it is time for us to move on to a more efficient and modern way of doing things, then we ought to consider it, that's for sure. And as Supervisor Retzloff had mentioned, if there's 15 people or 20 people that are sitting, or these candidates are having to go in front of, they really don't have a background in law enforcement, I don't know if that's the most practical or effective way of continuing the hiring process within our law enforcement ranks. So that's why I'm still going to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Kulisky. Supervisor Franco, you have the floor.
I feel like we're starting to debate the larger issue now, and it hasn't even been referred, whether it does or not. I'd like to call a vote.
Call the question. Second. Second by Supervisor Ron Frederick.
Roll call.
Okay, this needs 2/3 vote, so I'm going to clear the board. We have a call to question to end debate. Yes if you're in favor, no if you're not. You called the question to close debate on the issue. So right now we're voting yes if you want to close debate, no if you do not. How many we need? 15. Uh, 18. It passes. The motion passes, so we're going to close debate on this issue. Now we're going to vote on the referral to Judiciary and Law Committee.
Roll call requested.
There is a roll call. This will be a simple majority vote. So it's yes if you want to refer it back to committee, no if you do not.
All right, can you redo that?
Okay, right now,
Can you redo the board?
yes, sir. Give us a second. Moving too fast. So again, right now, we're voting on the referral to the Judiciary and Law Committee. Yes if you're in favor of the referral, no if you're not.
No, 8, yes, so it failed.
So the motion does fail. It will be referred back to the motion failed, so we're going to move on to the ordinance on hand from the resolution, from the Finance Administration Committee. Again, if you're in favor of the resolution, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. Did you request a roll call, Supervisor Rose? Seeing that the ordinance passes. Moving on.
Excuse me, Resolution 8 from the Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the appointment of Barb Wisniewski to the Brookside Board of Trustees. Grady, yes. Hallman, yes. Berg, yes. Nudo, yes. Gable, excused. Celebrity, yes. Rodriguez, I'm assuming yes. Yes.
We have a motion, Supervisor Grady?
Move Resolution 8.
I have a motion by Supervisor Grady and a second by Supervisor Holman. Supervisor Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As been documented earlier, Brookside Board of Trustees has had a number of vacancies on their board, and this is an effort to shore up that vacancy list, and we've been very pleased that both of our candidates here were at the committee meeting. They're here in the county boardroom, so I would encourage your approval of Resolution Number 8. It was passed unanimously in committee.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Any discussion in regards to this? Supervisor Holman, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize to the chair of my committee. If there's no objection, if we could include 9 through 11 on that after being read, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
I don't seem to have any issues with that.
No, I do object. I'd like to have the two taken separately for Barbara Wisniewski and Judy Jensen. The last two can go as a group. That's fine.
All right, well, so what we're going to do is we're going to take Resolution Number 8 as its own. So Supervisor Nudo, you have the floor.
I just want to say I believe this is a good choice by the county executive, and as a Board of Trustee at Brookside, I look forward to work with her.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Nudo. Seeing no other discussion on this, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Resolution 9 from the Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the appointment of Judy Jensen to the Brookside Board of Trustees. Grady, yes. Hallman, yes. Berg, yes. Nudo, yes. Gable, excused. Celebrity, yes. Rodriguez, yes.
Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
Move Resolution Number 9.
Thank you. It's motion by Supervisor Grady, a second by Supervisor Berg. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you. As stated before, we have Judy Jensen here in the gallery. She was with the committee at our vote. It was unanimous. I would encourage your support.
Supervisor Nudo.
Again, I want to show my support. Believe it's a very good choice, and I look forward to work with her at the Board of Trustees in Brookside.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes.
Resolution 10 from the Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the reappointment of John O'Day to the Kenosha County Board of Health. Grady, yes. Hallman, yes. Berg, yes. Nudo, yes. Gable, excused. Celebrity, yes. Rodriguez, yes.
Supervisor Grady, you have the floor.
Move Resolution Number 10.
Motion by Supervisor Grady and a second by Supervisor Nudo. Supervisor Grady.
Yes, if you look at your docket here, both Supervisor O'Day and Diane Gerlach, Dr. Gerlach are reappointed. I'd encourage you to take both 10 and 11 in the same motion.
That's fine. So,
Let me read this.
yeah, read 11, please.
Resolution 11 from the Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Dr. Diane Gerlach to the Kenosha County Board of Health. Grady, yes. Hallman, yes. Berg, yes. Nudo, yes. Gable, excused. Celebrity, yes. Rodriguez, yes.
I have a motion by Supervisor Grady and a second by Supervisor Celebrity. Supervisor Grady, on both motions.
On both motions are recommended.
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passed.
Resolution 12 from Chairman Esposito, a resolution to place an advisory referendum on the November 2018 ballot on addressing the dark store loophole.
Further Legislative Committee.
13 from Supervisors Esposito, Grady, and Decker, a resolution calling on the legislator to address the dark store loophole.
Refer to Legislative Committee.
Approval of the May 15th, 2018 minutes by Supervisor Franco.
To adopt the minutes from the May 15th board meeting.
First by Supervisor Franco. Second. Second by Supervisor Klitsky. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Motion, sir. First, a motion by Supervisor Nudo, a second by Supervisor Sklitsky. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.